Hey, what's up everybody? This is C.L.S. All-in-One. In today's video, I'll be unboxing and installing an awesome new Android car stereo I just got from my Cadillac Escalade made by AuCar Auto. This is a plug-and-play Tesla-style stereo with a giant 13.6-inch screen and an Android 11 operating system, which has a ton of features such as hands-free Bluetooth, built-in Wi-Fi, steering wheel control support, an AM/FM radio, Google Play, Android Auto and CarPlay support, GPS navigation, touchscreen controls for the heater and AC, stock backup camera support, and much more. For the screen, it has a capacitive multi-touch IPS HD screen with 1920 by 1080 resolution. For the CPU, it has a Snapdragon 665 AIE Qualcomm 8-core processor, which can reach speeds up to 2 GHz. For the memory, it has 4 GB of RAM and 64 GB of internal memory. And here's a couple of pictures of what the stock stereo looked like before. It had an 8-inch touchscreen with lower resolution and a very simple user interface. And this actually was a very high-tech stereo back in 2007 when it came out, but technology has come a long way since then, making this stereo very dated. But now, with this new AuCar Android car stereo, I have most of the modern features found in newer cars. And for anyone who is interested in getting this car stereo or checking out other products from AuCar Auto, there will be a link in the description along with coupon code C.L.S. All-in-One to save you an additional $50. Okay, now it's time to start unboxing this stereo. Okay, right on the top here is a screen protector inside of a folder with some foam to protect it. And just to let you know, mine ended up being just a little bit too big to fit the screen, and I did contact the manufacturer about this, and they should be sending me a new one. And just to let you know, the car stereo still works fine without it. Also inside the box is a nice colored manual with a lot of different pictures. And here's a smaller installation manual that shows some pictures of the back of the stereo and what all the plugins do, and the different types of wire harnesses. And there's a bunch of different types of wire harnesses, connections, and adapters, such as this SIM card adapter, which allows you to put a SIM card inside the adapter, then insert this into the SIM card slot for the car stereo, so it can have its own service just like a regular phone. And here's a look at the box, 370Z, AuCar Tesla style series. And here is the stereo. And this does come with a clear protective coating on the front of it, but you'll want to wait to peel this off until after installation. Located on the top left side is two small holes. The top one is going to be your built-in microphone, and the bottom one is access to the reset button. Then on the back of the stereo is where you'll find all your plug-in port connections for power, video, and audio. And located at the bottom is also a couple plug-in ports for the AC and heater controls, which I'll show here later in the video. Then we have a whole mess of wire harness connections here in a couple different bags, and I'll go through these here in just a second. And there's also some wipes for installing the screen protector along with a squeegee. Okay, let's take a look at everything in the larger bag. So here's a couple USB connections that plug into the back of the stereo, an external speaker for chime sounds, which I did not end up using, and I'll explain that later. Here's a miscellaneous connection that I did not use, some audio port connections, a video port connection, an antenna adapter, another style of an antenna adapter, another video connection cable, a SIM card port connection that plugs into the back of the stereo, another video connection, and I believe this one is for the backup camera, and some miscellaneous audio and video connections, a Wi-Fi antenna for phone service, and then a second antenna that does the same thing. And here's a GPS antenna, and a microphone, and you can use this if you don't want to use the built-in microphone, but the built-in microphone seems to work pretty well. And in the second bag is going to be the main wire harness, and this supplies most of the audio and power to the car stereo. And then this harness right here, which I did not end up using, this is going to be for a different type of setup, which I did not use. And just to let you know, a lot of these wire harnesses will probably end up not being used. It just depends on what features you're going to be using and what features your car has, such as headrest monitors, overhead monitors, etc. Okay, it's time to start installing the new stereo, but first we're going to have to remove the old stock stereo. And we're going to start off by removing some of these dash panels. And for this, I like to use a dash trim pry tool that's made of plastic or nylon, and this helps protect the car from being damaged when you're prying the panels off. So I will start with this panel on the passenger side. If you just pry on the bottom side of it, it'll start coming out. Then the center console right here needs to be pulled out. So if we just pull up on it right here, that'll pop it loose. Then you will also have to pull up towards the front right here. And there'll be a 12-volt port connection that you'll need to unplug. But first I'll lift up the center console lid or armrest, then start to take this out and unplug the connection on the bottom side of the 12-volt port. Then I will use the pry tool to start removing the center trim panel surrounding the car stereo. So just take your time here and work all the way around the stereo until it pops loose. And once this panel is loose, there'll be a couple connections to unplug. On the right side here behind the buttons, there'll be one connector here. And on the left side is another connector. And now this panel can be removed. Next, the screws that secure the car stereo can be removed, and I'll be using a 7mm socket and driver. Once the stereo is loose, you can begin pulling it out, and there's going to be some more connections to unplug on the back side of the stereo. So you're going to have a couple of antennas and 3 main connections on the back of the stereo. So with the antenna connection, you'll need to push in, then pull out. Then the GPS antenna can be unclipped, and the same thing goes for the other 3 remaining connections. And depending on the model of stereo you have, you may have 4 connections instead of 3. Now I can say goodbye to the old stereo, but I'm going to go ahead and save this just in case I need it in the future. Next, all the screws that secure the heater controls can be removed, and these are 7mm in size as well. Then there's going to be 2 screws for the foot pedal control right here that can be removed as well, and it's not necessary to unplug this, you can just let this hang down below. Now the heater controls can be removed and unplugged, and there's going to be 3 to 4 connections on the back side that'll need to be unclipped. Now this next part gets a little bit intricate, but what we need to do is actually take this apart to access the PCB that's inside this, because we're going to be plugging this into the back of the car stereo. So I will start by popping off the knobs on each side. Then on the back side is going to be 4 screws that need to be removed, and these screws do require a T10 torque head bit to remove. Then once these screws are removed, it can be popped apart, and the front portion can be set to the side. And on the back portion, there's going to be 2 connections that can be unplugged, so carefully unplug those. Then this plugs into the back of the car stereo. So now I will grab the new Android car stereo, then located at the bottom you'll see 2 connection ports, and that's where these plug in. Then once they're plugged in, they can secure to the back with 4 small black screws. And these screws do come supplied, but you'll want to be careful when installing these because they are somewhat soft and strip easy if you over tighten them. Next, I will grab what I will call the main wire harness. So one side plugs into the back of the stereo, and the other side plug into 2 of the connectors on the car side. So this plug with the white sticker connects here, and the other one connects here. Now both of these connections do look pretty similar, but they do have a slightly different shape to them, so they can't get mixed up. Then this video cable with the black connector will connect to this brown connection right here. So far I've connected to 3 main connections on the car side. Now it's time to plug the other end into the back of the car stereo. So the black connection will plug in right here beneath the fuse. So it just pushes in right here and then clips in place. And then the white connector plugs in right here. And this smaller plug right here with the red and black wires is for an optional chime speaker. For my vehicle, I already have a chime speaker that is located somewhere on the driver's side that makes noises when the door is open or the headlights are left on, so I have no need for this chime speaker. Next, I can plug in the connections for the heater and AC controls. And once again, these all have a slightly different shape to them, so they can't be mixed up. Now I will use this audio and video wire harness connector and plug this into the back of the Android car stereo in the top middle port location. And here's a look at the wire harness after being plugged in. Now the brown video plug-in can be connected to the yellow video plug-in we connected to the car earlier. So the yellow plug plugs in right here to the brown connector. Next, I will plug in the USB wire harness. So one end of this has two USB ports and the other end connects right here on the back of the Android car stereo. Next, it's time to install the GPS antenna. So first you want to mount the antenna where you want it to be located, then route the wire to the back of the Android car stereo and plug it in right here. So for my GPS antenna, I mounted it on the top of the dash, then routed the wire through the defrost vents into the stereo opening, then to the back of the stereo. And to route the wire like this, it may be easier to remove the clock that's located above the car stereo opening. Then after the wire is routed, you can put the clock back in place. Now the antenna adapter can be plugged into the antenna on the car side. Then the other end can be plugged into the back of the stereo. Now this is ready for a test, and we're going to make sure everything's working correctly before we put the dash back together. And keep in mind, if you have other accessories like headrest monitors or an overhead monitor, you may have to plug in some other connections. And for the two USB cable ends, I did route those through the bottom of the stereo opening, and then I drilled a hole inside the compartment of the center console right here. Then I routed the USB cables through the hole, and they can be accessed by opening the lid right here. And for now, this is just a temporary solution until I can get some USB cable mount ends to make this look a little bit more professional. And before testing the stereo, I did go ahead and secure it with a couple of screws to make sure it stays in place. So the first time you initially boot the stereo, it takes about 40 to 45 seconds to load to the home screen. Then after that, when you turn the car off, it just goes into sleep mode, and when you turn the ignition back on, it wakes up in 5 seconds or less. So after it boots up to the home screen, what you're looking for is to make sure the audio and video is working correctly, along with other features such as steering wheel controls, Bluetooth, and the backup camera. So as you can see here, the steering wheel controls are working good, and you can also check the AC and heater controls by swiping up from the bottom. And this is one of my favorite features of this stereo. I really like having the digital touchscreen for the AC and heater controls. It really gives my vehicle a modern look. And more than likely, after the first time booting up, there's going to be quite a few different settings you'll have to play with, such as the temperature units. On mine, it was Celsius to start with, and I had to change it to Fahrenheit so I could read it correctly. But keep in mind, after you make any changes, you'll have to save and reboot it or reset it in order for the changes to take effect. And as you can see here, when I turn the ignition off, the stereo shuts off like it should. As far as the testing goes, I did run into a few issues with Bluetooth phone call audio not broadcasting through the stereo, but I was able to fix this issue by upgrading the firmware with an update provided by the seller, which had to be downloaded and placed on a flash drive, then plugged into the stereo, which then prompted the update screen to upgrade the firmware. And as far as this audio issue goes, it may have just been a bug that's related to my specific phone, but after the upgrade, the audio worked as it should. So my stereo testing is now complete, and I'm ready to start assembling everything back together, starting with the foot pedal extension controls, then the rest of the screws for the stereo. But if you did happen to run into some other issues with something not working, make sure to double check all your connections, then try again. After securing the stereo with all the screws, it's time to attach the center dash panel that surrounds the stereo by plugging it in on both sides, then pushing it in place. Then the center console piece with the cup holders can be connected to the 12-volt port, then pushed in place in the front and back. Then the dash panel on the passenger side can be pushed back in place. And during this step, you may have to use the pry tool at the top to get this tucked underneath the top dash lip. And now the installation is done, so it's time to install the screen protector. But unfortunately, as I mentioned earlier, this is slightly too large to fit this area, so I will not be able to use this. So I'm going to go ahead and remove this protective coating and use the stereo just like it is. Now let's go ahead and start this up, and you can see how fast this boots up. And here's another cool feature with this stereo. Now when you open the door, there's an indicator on the screen showing the door is open. And here's another new feature with this stereo. When you put the vehicle in reverse, it now has guidelines that indicate when you're turning left or right. So there's quite a few apps pre-installed on this, such as a music player, but this is a pretty plain music player, and there's a lot better apps you can download out there for playing music. But if you're not looking for anything special, this will work. But for myself, I do prefer a fancier music player such as Power Amp, which displays album art and has a ton of other features, such as visualizations. So the Bluetooth audio can work in a couple different ways. You can simply just connect to the Android car stereo with your phone, then open the Bluetooth Music app to stream Bluetooth audio and make phone calls. Or you can use Android Auto to connect wirelessly through Bluetooth to broadcast audio, watch podcasts, navigate, and much more. But I did notice when using a Bluetooth connection with Android Auto, the resolution seems to be lower and the items on the menu seem to be larger, which may just be a bug with the Android Auto on my phone. So I prefer to use a wired USB connection when connecting to Android Auto, and it seems to work better with no resolution issues. To navigate with Android Auto, it's super easy. You can either use the voice button or use OK Google.
Navigate to Target.
Okay, Target. Here we go.
And you can do the same thing for phone calls as well.
Call voicemail.
Calling voicemail.
Overall, this seems to be a really nice stereo. It did have a couple of audio and video issues, but I was able to resolve them with updates and alternate methods. The video quality looks amazing, especially on this giant 13.6-inch screen. And the 64 gigabytes of built-in memory allows for plenty of storage for music and movies. And the sound output is great. It gets plenty loud. And here is a quick sample. About the sound is it does sound nice and clear up to a certain point. For instance, if you turn it up past 24, it does start to distort, but at this point it's plenty loud and just as loud as the stock stereo, if not louder. And you could probably play with the equalizer settings and turn the bass down a little bit and get a little bit more volume out of it, but like I said, it's plenty loud. And I'd also like to mention I'm just recording this with my cell phone, so the mic on this isn't the greatest, and this does sound better in person. Okay, it's now time for me to go, but I will leave you with some instructions of how to connect to Android Auto and CarPlay. Have yourself a great day, and I'll see you next time. And if you like this video, if you could, hit that like button.
Use a USB cable to connect your Android phone to the car, wait a few seconds, and use Android Auto on the car side. Connect your Android phone Bluetooth to the car Bluetooth. After the Bluetooth connection is successful, you can use Android Auto on the car side a few seconds later. Connect the Bluetooth of your iPhone to the Bluetooth of the car. After connecting Bluetooth, select Use CarPlay in the phone pop-up box. After connection is successful, you can use Apple CarPlay on the car side a few seconds later. The phone turns on the personal hotspot. The HU is connected to the mobile hotspot. Open the video app, click TV projection on the playback interface, select HU, and you can start casting. After the screen casting is successful, the phone can lock the screen or switch to other functions at this time.